So I learned something today. Apparently, Wide Guard was buffed in the 7th generation. I think this is actually an interesting point to talk about because it seems like with all the other nerfs that have happened in Pokemon Sun and Moon, that some of the nerfs were just way too much. There's been a lot of overtuning, I feel, in Pokemon Sun and Moon, and the nerf to Dark Void, it seems less and less justified the more you look into it. So Wide Guard got changed in the 7th generation that actually made it work against moves like Dark Void. So this was the biggest change. This is what Wide Guard has always needed, is to work against non-damaging status moves. So Wide Guard now also protects against status moves that can target multiple Pokemon, such as Dark Void or Leer. I think that that's the biggest issue for Dark Void. Like in the 6th generation, the problem is you couldn't use Wide Guard to stop it. That you couldn't really do anything to stop it. It was a Scarf Smeargle. And unless you outsped that Scarf Smeargle or outsped the Focus Sash Smeargle and focused 100% into destroying that thing until it went for the Dark Void, you were in trouble. Same for like Taunt, so I guess Prankster Taunt, Fake Out. There were ways of slowing it down, but there was no way of actually like securing the stop onto Dark Void like that. So, Wide Guard can also be used consecutively without failing, however it does decrease the chance of success for other ones. So, I mean, you can spam the Wide Guard as much as you want to just stop that Dark Void from the Smeargle, and then you can have your other Pokemon kind of work around it. So there was a lot of potential counterplay to stop Dark Void from being as overwhelmingly oppressive as it turned out being in the 6th generation. And I mean, this could have even been an effect back from the 5th generation or something like that, because Dark Void Smeargle has pretty much been around since Dark Void. That, like, one of the early Pokemon Tournament Worlds finalists, I think they had, like, the Fierce Smeargle back in the day for 4th generation, so it's definitely something that does find play, and now we have this. Also, you can use Z Wide Guard and raise defense by 1 stage. So Wide Guard certainly still gets play, but I feel that this buff is now going to be not utilized because of the nerf to Dark Void, and maybe it just kind of shows Dark Void was a little too nerfed. What I've been saying about Dark Void is that choose one. Choose one of the nerfs. Either make it to where it has 50% accuracy and then let Smeargle have it just because, or keep it at 80% accuracy, that way Darkrai is actually still usable. But another weird thing is that there's no triple battles. So there's no lead Darkrai in the center, put 3 Pokemon asleep anymore. And even then, the 80% accuracy was fairly balanced. Like, sometimes would miss, and there goes your whole strategy. I understand that gambling RNG like that isn't something desirable in a competitive game, or like trying to do something like VGC or a competitive aspect of Pokemon, but at least it was an interesting dynamic. Also, there was like, you could have knocked it down to 70%, 75%. Have it be closer to using 2 Hypnosis at the same time instead of worse than Hypnosis. So in singles, it's completely useless because Darkrai actually gets the Hypnosis, and in doubles, it's useless because there's no point of trying to put that many Pokemon to sleep or anything like that. So yeah, Dark Void can now only be successfully used by Darkrai or a Pokemon that transformed into Darkrai. If this move is used by any other Pokemon, including Assist, it will fail. So that's also another nerf, because there were some Assist strategies, and I love those strategies, honestly. I honestly just love Assist strategies. They can just build a team by using these moves, and then having a Dark Void on Smeargle, and then whenever you use Assist, it's going to call for these moves. So there was some crazy stuff, like the Prankster Liepard. You Prankster Liepard, assist into an immediate Dark Void. I think that that's kind of balanced because you have to give up a lot on your team. You have to give up a lot of potential moves if you want to go into the Dark Void consistently, and then that does leave you with a few other options as well, but you're having Prankster Dark Void, so you can do a lot of really silly things. So Assist Meowstic also had some potential strats. I think we actually had like the Dark Void Assist Meowstic in one of the Fan Fridays, and that was kind of like one of the coolest ideas ever, but that's dead. So I think that that's another kind of unnecessary nerf to Dark Void. That's not even Smeargle Sketch, but it's just you can't use it unless Darkrai. So kind of awkwardly complex and then reduced to 50% accuracy. So I kind of don't understand. And like the Darkinium Z doesn't even give you anything. All the user's lowered stats are reset. So if Darkrai somehow had its speed reduced, that wasn't paralysis or something. I don't know. I just feel like Dark Void was way overly nerfed, but this was the cure. The cure was Wide Guard. I would actually like to see Smeargle still able to use Dark Void, or maybe a slightly nerfed version of Dark Void, and then be able to have some Wide Guard counterplay around it. So there's a lot of viable Pokemon with the Wide Guard, and it would just make them more usable under certain situations, and then also just kind of improve the dynamics that are going on in double battles. That now, oh, just in case something's running a Discharge or an Earthquake. So now that Wide Guard is protecting you from those moves. And that was kind of one of the biggest issues, that we look at Landorus. Landorus in the previous generations has been overwhelmingly oppressive. And I think that that was another big issue that we saw with the 2016 VGC, because we had Primal Groudon and Primal Kyogre using their signature moves. You could wide guard that. You could wide guard those signature moves and you'd be having a good time, but the problem is Smeargle shows up. You have a Dark Void Smeargle next to that, and you can't wide guard it. So you'd have to do a lot of really tricky stuff. Like, you'd have to taunt the Smeargle, and then wide guard the other powerful move, and then play around it some more. But wide guard would be like the one-stop shop to shut that down, and the most powerful strategies that were kind of just stagnating the meta would have gone away. That could have opened up many more new strategies, and led to a much less boring VGC 2015 and VGC 2016. Also, I'm pretty sure that the move Dark Void was banned in a VGC many years ago. Like, I don't remember if it was like 2010 or 2011. I don't remember which year it was, but a long time ago, I remember Dark Void being banned entirely, so you could have done that. You keep it on the Smeargle for some gimmicks and lulz, and then when it comes to VGC or the main tournament, you can stop it that way. So I feel that there was just not enough consideration going on, and now Wide Guard's still usable, but doesn't have that extra use case. It doesn't have that chance to be an awesome move because of that, because now you're giving up Protect for Wide Guard, and if they're using high damage single targeting moves, or if they, they distract you, that you see the Smeargle, you Wide Guard, and then Smeargle does Spore. There are so many cool things that could have happened, and now, Darkrai, Smeargle, all those strategies are kind of dead right now. Let's see what else Wide Guard is useful for, because there are multiple status moves that do affect adjacent foes. So I brought this out right here. But we do have other moves, such as the Poison Gas. So I mean, yeah, Poison Gas, we saw a Poison Gas strategy on Fan Fridays pretty recently. There's a lot of just interesting things. String Shot. I feel like String Shot needs a lot more play as well, because String Shot lowers both opponents' speed by 2. That's about as absurd as it can possibly get. We have Growl, so it does have extra usage outside the Dark Void, but these aren't like the most common used moves, unfortunately. That this could bring some diversity and then some extra usage, but that was just kind of stopped, and now there's not really much going on with that. Now, also looking into some other changes in Pokemon Sun and Moon, I've done so many videos. I was actually really upset because in one of my recent Balance Patch videos, I was talking about how Game Freak didn't really talk about all the changed moves, and even with data mining, even with everyone trying to analyze the game, there's still like new information or things that people aren't bringing up regularly, such as Throw getting Map Block. I didn't find this out until just a few days-ish, weeks ago, and that was actually really surprising, but it also shows that some of these changes that Pokemon or Game Freak has made are just completely useless. I guess if you're going for the theme of Throw, Map Block makes sense, but I don't think there's ever going to be a situation competitively where this is going to be used, because Throw has a 45 speed, and Map Block doesn't have any priority. Like, when I saw it, I was like, wait, did Map Block get a buff to +1 priority in Pokemon Sun and Moon? But no, none of that. So really, the only viable user of Map Block is going to be the Greninja, and even then, now we have Tapu Koko. So Tapu Koko outspeeds Greninja, it dies, and then Map Block never gets a chance to work. Like, even if Map Block was at +1, or even +3 to stop Fake Out, I think that it would still be very balanced, because you can status through the Map Block. So it kind of works like a King's Shield. Sure, they're getting a protection turn, but if you could hit them with a status, then that means their whole turn falls apart. Also, Map Block just leaves it to where, while you're setting up behind Map Block, your opponent potentially gets 2 Pokemon to set up as you're using Map Block and not doing anything on the Greninja, but Throw doesn't get to do any of that. And even with Trick Room, that's still going to be difficult, because Map Block will only work if used on the first turn that Pokemon enters the field. So the first turn setup is going to be Trick Room. So that means you have to have Trick Room up, you have to switch out a Pokemon into the Throw, or you also have a Pokemon Faint, Throw come in, and then Map Block, and then that means you have a Trick Room Pokemon, unless the Trick Room setter died, in which case it might be usable, because then the Trick Room setter at least gets a free turn without having to worry about anything. But the idea of Trick Room is that you go faster than your opponent, pretty much guaranteed, and you just blow up both opponents before they get a chance to move. So I really don't know what to think about that. I kind of find it interesting that Game Freak is trying to make less and less exclusive moves as well, that we've kind of seen throughout the time. Whenever there's an exclusive move, sometimes other Pokemon do gain access to that, and we saw that for a short amount of time when it came to the Kalos starters. Kalos starters, they have their signature moves, but then other Pokemon started picking it up, like Water Shuriken on the Greninja. Well, Water Shuriken can now be known by Excelgor as of Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. Miss Magia's got Delphox's Mystical Fire, and then when it comes to Chestnut and the Spiky Shield, a lot of Pokemon have Spiky Shield right now. And that's kind of the few things I find interesting about, like, the changes in the Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, they did some decent little bits of balance. They added moves. I think they also changed with a couple of move-based power and things like that, but Sun and Moon had a much larger balance patch. They did all kinds of changes. I'm kind of shocked that some of the changes that happened in Pokemon Sun and Moon didn't happen sooner in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. Like, that would have been the coolest thing if for Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, Wide Guard affected status moves. So that means we did have 2014 being a little silly, but Wide Guard stopping out Landorus and the Dark Void Smeargle, we might have had a really exciting way of playing Pokemon. That VGC world would have been much different just off of the change of one simple move. And then there's going to be other changes, so I'm still really caught up on this, if you guys haven't noticed. I'm still really hoping that there's going to be balance patches for Pokemon Sun and Moon, or at least a long list of changes for the new Pokemon game. We need updates, because Pokemon stagnates really quickly, and I think once Game Freak gets in a hold of their game, because I think that these changes just kind of show a little bit of uncertainty with how they expect a game to play through. So they just kind of nerf things a little too hard, I feel, and then they also go back on their decisions, like with the Power Up Punch, and then things kind of get messy. So maybe after all that, there could be some changes, but yeah, Dark Void is RIP, and there's a couple of other things that have potential. So if you guys enjoyed the video, hope you all have a nice day. Thank you very much for watching.